Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports on YouTube. Jack Armstrong Emery behind the scenes making everything sound and look good. We're now joined by David Helman with Paul Catalina, Craig, and David Smoke. And David, thank you very much, I guess, for the Rams going all in and acquiring all those weapons and getting a couple of things fall in their lap. It wasn't easy, but to win it all, your thoughts about the season they had?
I mean, I think just looking back on what they did and the way it all worked out, I think it's an interesting trend, and I wonder if the Rams are kind of working in a market inefficiency right now. Like, I mean, you can't hope to completely copy any team's blueprint perfectly. You know, I feel like for a few years, everybody was trying to get on that Seattle Seahawks train of build a great team around a rookie quarterback, but it's just a lot easier said than done. But having said that, I think the Rams have at least partially proved that maybe we overvalue draft picks. Maybe if you're willing to part ways with some of that asset, it can help you acquire a lot of proven talent. They certainly weren't shy about it. Like I said, I don't know if you can just completely replicate that strategy, but I think it's something teams are going to have to take a long, hard look at, because we've been conditioned to believe that draft picks are worth their weight in gold. You know, that's the thing that you can't part ways with. But the Rams just showed us that if you've got a good roster, you can use that to put yourself over the top. And, you know, if it hadn't worked out, maybe we'd feel differently, but it did. And so I think I'm interested to see how other teams kind of adapt to that and say, okay, well, maybe we need to at least slightly change our line of thinking. So I think it's going to be an interesting 2 or 3 years while teams kind of try to catch up to that trend and take what they can get out of it. I'm interested to see how it kind of changes the way we look at things.
I guess it would be, I mean, the Rams, I don't know if it's luck or if it was carefully planned that way, but they pulled the trigger at the exact right time for all of them. It's not, you know, whether you should do it or shouldn't, it's what time you should actually pull that trigger, which I think is probably the hardest sweet spot to find.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that's the great thing about football. Like, luck goes into all of this, and I don't think you can overreact too much because, you know, Matthew Stafford is one of the pieces that put them over the top, but if Jaquiski Tartt catches a pretty easy interception in the NFC title game, they lose that game, and they're sitting at home thinking like, man, we did all this stuff and we still came up short. That's kind of the beauty of football is no matter how many levers you pull the right way, you're still counting on a few bounces of a very weirdly shaped ball to go in your direction. So, like I said, I don't think you can overreact to it too much, but yeah, I mean, kudos to the Rams for being bold. I mean, they weren't afraid to trade away a bunch for Stafford. They weren't afraid to trade away a bunch for Von Miller. They went and got OBJ when he became available. Just all of the stuff that most fans wish their team would consider, they were willing to do. And they still needed a lot of breaks to go their way, but nobody cares about that now. They've got the trophy.
David, as an LSU fan, you were guaranteed to be happy with LSU alums either way that game played out, but there were a couple on that Rams roster. Andrew Whitworth, big old offensive lineman, got definitely a lot of camera time, but OBJ obviously with the injury as well. Just your thoughts on those two guys and OBJ and that injury, just what was kind of going through your head as all that played out?
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously you skew so heavily as an LSU fan toward Joe and Jamar for everything they just did a couple years ago. So I think the vast majority of LSU fans were rooting for the Bengals and for obvious reasons. But yeah, I mean, Odell Beckham is one of the most special players to ever play for LSU. And you go back and Andrew Whitworth's entire career is incredible. I mean, he won 3 high school titles as a high school player in Louisiana. He won the first national title in 40 years for LSU back in 2003. He was an All-American. Obviously, he's been playing in the league. He's been playing in the NFL since 2004, which is incredible for anyone. And you know, I assume that's going to be his last game as a professional, and he gets the Super Bowl. So Yeah, and honestly, and this is just me thinking out loud. I don't know anything, but I wonder if, with everything Odell's been through, I mean, he's not that young anymore. And that's
Right.
2 ACL injuries in the last 15 months. You know, I wouldn't be shocked if he was like, "Hey, I won a championship in my last game. Maybe this is enough for me." I hope not, because I like watching him play. But yeah, man, it's, you know, you form attachments to guys that do that much for your college program. So I would have loved to see Joe and Jamar pull it off in so early in their careers, but with everything that Whitworth and Odell have been through, yeah, it was cool to see that pay off for them as well.
Just want to throw a hypothetical out to you. If the Cowboys were to decide to at least do a partial Rams model, which means trading away not first-round draft picks, but also second-round draft picks, future first-round draft picks, but the pick this year also has to be attractive, is 24 enough to move up and get somebody? And is there somebody that would really be that attractive to them to go up and get high?
You're talking about moving up in this year's draft order?
Yeah. Or just to go get somebody, a veteran or something like that.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about veterans, draft picks become less valuable in the offseason once the pecking order has been set. Like, if you remember, when they traded for Amari Cooper, that was in the middle of the season, and so the Raiders are thinking, oh, well, the Cowboys are below 500. We could get ourselves like a top 15 pick, depending on how this goes. Whereas now, you know, the Cowboys have pick 24, which is, it's still valuable, but it's a lot less valuable than it would have been in October when things were still up in the air. So I think it's possible. I don't know if this is the sexiest draft to be going up for guys. I mean, maybe, you know, there's some really great offensive tackles in this talent pool, or maybe if one of these like blue chip edge rushers started to fall, maybe you would consider it. But honestly, I think for the Cowboys, like, for the most part, I like the way that they do things. I don't think they need to blow it up and completely reinvent the wheel. I would just like to see a little bit more of a balance. I brought this up today. One of the best things I think they've done in recent years, they traded a couple day 3 picks away for Robert Quinn, who was kind of on the downturn of his career, and they gave up not a whole lot for him. And lo and behold, he comes here and has a 12-sack season. He signs in Chicago and had whatever it was, 17 or 18 this year. So clearly a guy that still had a lot of gas left in the tank. I think you got to be willing to pull the trigger on things like that. Or another great example, and again, this goes back to maybe we overvalue these draft picks. Chidobe Awuzie was pick 60 for the Cowboys in 2017. He's a good player. He had a good career here in Dallas. And then he signs with Cincinnati and goes on to start for their Super Bowl team. Again, good player, not a transcendent player, not a guy that you're probably going to build around. And so I look at that and I say, okay, why wouldn't I be willing to part ways with that for a guy like Von Miller? Because that's what the Rams did. You know, you look at it and you're like, well, we could give up our second-round pick for a guy that's going to the Hall of Fame to help our defense get over the top. And it's easy to say, like, oh, but that's our second-round pick. Like, that could be anybody. But by and large, the Chido Awuzies of the world are what you're getting with pick 60. So, yeah, he's a good player who gave you 4 years of service. But I think parting ways with a pick like that for 10 games of Von Miller with the potential to bring him back after the season, I think that's a worthwhile risk. And I think that's something that teams are going to have to reevaluate when they look at the Rams' success is, look, I'm not telling you to get rid of all of your draft picks, but yeah, maybe there's a market inefficiency there. Maybe there's a way you can kind of have it both ways. And maybe we think of these draft picks as just a little bit more valuable than they actually are.
One of the things Jerry Jones said recently is he wants to see the team get better at improving their flaws in season and not having to wait until after. This is something that's kind of spanned a couple of coaching staffs now, because it was an issue with Jason Garrett. It's been an issue. It was an issue this year, especially with the offensive line and the way that kind of spiraled downward. David, how do they do that, knowing that personnel, like, you can go and get, make that trade for a second-round pick for maybe an offensive lineman that might be available, but knowing that's not available and trying to mask your weaknesses, because all the teams in the NFL, no matter how good they are, have some area of weakness that they have to at least mask and make sure teams don't exploit?
I mean, it's a great question. It's a good question because it doesn't have an easy answer. I mean, I wish I could tell you, how do you not get on a practice field with professional coaching and professional players and address the issues with the penalties? I mean, I don't know. I don't know why that doesn't get corrected, or I don't know how that doesn't get corrected. And I looked this up last week. I mean, the Cowboys were specifically on holding calls. They were 13 calls over the league average. So, I mean, that's almost a flag per game more than what you're getting from everybody else in the NFL. I don't have an answer for you. Same thing. I mean, if they knew how to adapt to what defenses were taking away